Hello, my name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing some fall book recommendations. Fall is my favorite time of the year, and so I could not be more excited to recommend you some books that I think would be perfect to read during the fall. These are like, the cozy books that make you just want to snuggle in and read, or they're like the spooky books that are perfect for Halloween. They're the thrillers that have the spooky vibes, or even like the dark academia kind of books, because I do think those are perfect for this time of year. Before we do jump into the book recommendations, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring today's video, because as we do approach a new season in the fall, you might be thinking, I want to try out a new perfume that smells more like the fall, that smells more woodsy. And I think Scentbird is the perfect way to try out new perfumes at an affordable price, because instead of buying expensive full-size perfume bottles every time the seasons change, you can discover new seasonal favorites every month with Scentbird. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service where you can shop from over 600 brands. I love that Scentbird's sample sizes are 8 times bigger than the average perfume sample size, and it gives you a 30-day supply. You can choose a new designer fragrance every month for just $16. And it's flexible so that you can skip any month with no penalties. And you can also add on 2 or 3 scents to every month if you choose to do so. Scentbird even works directly with top designer brands like Gucci and Versace, and maybe you've always been wanting to try out some of those more expensive perfumes but you didn't want to commit to the full bottle, and now you can. I have discovered my personal favorite fragrance of all time after taking Scentbird's little quiz that they have on the website. My favorite scent is called Hermetica Source 1. This is just my favorite thing ever, and I will definitely be purchasing a full-size bottle of this, but I'm so glad that I got to test it out for a while with Scentbird. This one makes sense though that it's my favorite because this one has bergamot essence, dry amber molecule, and fresh wood molecule, and this one does smell to me like it's somewhere between feminine and masculine. It just kind of has like a gender neutral smell to it, which is something that I also really like about this one. I also finally got the chance to try out the Dolce & Gabbana Light Blue, which I've been wanting to try out this scent for so long, and this scent is just magical. It smells so freaking good. They also did send me Skylar Sunshower, Scents of Wood, Orange, and Chestnut, and Grace de Monaco Promenade sur le Rocher. Sorry if I just butchered that one. And I absolutely love trying out the different scents because some of them, especially the Skylar Sunshower, I would have assumed that this would be too sweet for me, but it actually smells so freaking good and I really like this one. And exciting news, Scentbird is expanding to Canada as of September. Yeah, make sure to use my code gabbyreads for 30% off your first order with Scentbird using the link in my description, and that'll just be $11 for your first order. Huge thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get into the fall book recommendations. Alright, so the fall book recommendations, I do have these broken down into somewhat different categories. Like, I have a section for thrillers, and I have a section for horrors, and I have a section for like the dark academia type of books. But this first little stack of books that I have here doesn't really fall into any of the categories, but I just think they'd be perfect books to read in the fall, so I'm including them. The first one is going to be Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. I think this is the perfect book to read during the fall because it takes place at a pumpkin patch, and this one's a graphic novel that is just so freaking cute. It's just so colorful and so bright. And it just features like the cutest, softest characters, and I think I might reread this again this October because it just makes me so happy. It also takes place on Halloween night and it just has the best vibes. Another book series that I think is perfect to read in the fall, and I don't know how to explain why, is the Vicious and Vengeful series by Victoria Schwab. This series follows these 2 best friends who are in college, which maybe that's also why, because it kind of has that college, like, not dark academia vibe, but definitely like dark school vibes. And these 2 best friends become extraordinary humans, which basically means they're like superheroes kind of, but also one of them might be kind of more villainous. And this one really asks the question of, where do we draw the line between a hero and a villain? And this book series is just so fascinating. It's so freaking cool, and I just think it's the perfect time of year to read these. I don't know why, but it just is. Like, fall is going to be the best time to read these books, and it's just so iconic. Like, if you haven't read Vicious yet, this is the first book, this is the second book. If you haven't read Vicious yet, like, what are we even doing? This book is so freaking good. And then I have Elotsawe. This is a book that I just read for the first time this year, and this book is so perfect if you're looking for something that's like a really light fantasy magical kind of book to read at this time of year. because I'm not really a big fantasy reader myself, so that's why you're not going to see a lot of fantasy on this list, even though I know a lot of people really love reading fantasy in the fall. But with this book, this is just the perfect amount of little bit of magical, little bit of fantasy for me to really get on board with. And we're following this girl named Lotsaway who has these abilities that are kind of slightly magical. And we just follow her on this journey to try and figure out what happened to her cousin. And it's just very fall vibes. I don't remember if this book specifically mentions if it takes place during the fall exactly, but it just feels like it does. So yeah. The next one I would recommend is The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. This one is the only historical fiction novel that I have on this list because I do think this time of year is the time where I do start to crave historical fictions. I mean, most of the time though, I like to save historical fictions for like the winter time for some reason, but this one in particular I think would be a great one to read in the fall. This one is a really beautiful story that takes place during the Great Depression and during the Dust Bowl that occurred in Texas in the 1930s, I believe. And this book was just so powerful, and it's going to make you feel really grateful for everything that you have in your life. So I feel like this one would probably be perfect to read around like Thanksgiving time, you know, during that period of fall when you're just feeling very grateful. I think this book is fantastic, and be prepared to bawl your eyes out because you probably will. And then the last little book that I have in this first category is going to be Long Bright River by Liz Moore. I know I could probably fit this in with the thrillers, but I wanted this book to be on its own because I consider this to be more of a literary mystery kind of book. So it kind of reads a little bit more like literary fiction, and then it just has some mystery elements to it, but this is just one of my favorite books ever, and I do think it would be perfect to read at this time of year because in this book we're following this woman who's a cop, and she is trying to find her sister who's a drug addict, and her sister is missing and she doesn't know what's going on, and all of these women keep turning up dead in Philadelphia. There's just something about this book, you know, it feels like the perfect book to read on just like a cloudy day where there's like crunchy leaves outside, and it just has a really great story. There's a really great plot twist in this book. I loved the sister relationship in this book. It's a good one. It's such a good one. Alright, next up is going to be the thriller category of thrillers that I think that are perfect to read during the fall. And I think especially these thrillers because they kind of have some spooky elements to them, at least for the most part, and that's why I think they'd be perfect to read at this time of year. And I know the fall time is when people tend to gravitate more towards my favorite genres, right? Which is thrillers and horrors. And so if that is the case for you, then here are some books that I think would be especially perfect to read in the fall. The first one, of course, is going to be Lock Every Door by Riley Sager, as well as Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I think out of all of his books, these two are definitely the ones that have the most spooky vibes that I think are perfect to read during the fall, especially because both of these involve houses or apartment buildings that may or may not be haunted. And so I think for that reason alone, they just have really great vibes to them and they're just so much fun to read. I also think even though I wasn't a huge fan of Survive the Night, I do think this book would be perfect to read in the fall if you ever did intend to read this book, because it does take place in November 1991, and so it does take place during the fall, and so for that reason alone, I think it might be a good one to read during the fall. I think The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware is another one of my favorite spooky thrillers that I think would be absolutely perfect to read at this time of year, because this one also involves a smart house that may or may not be haunted, and it also follows this woman who's a nanny to these children, these children are just awful, you know, they're very demonic children, and she doesn't know what she's gotten herself into. And another book that has this similar vibe that I think would be perfect is The Nesting. This is another book that has a nanny that's taking care of these children. This one actually takes place in Norway, and this one describes itself as a gothic thriller, and this is also one of my favorite books. Like, these two have very similar vibes. They also kind of remind me of Bly Manor in a way as well, just because of the whole like nanny and the kids situation. And then I have The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I think this would be absolutely perfect to read on a cozy rainy day. This one is like the most iconic like whodunit story, you know, we're following this whole wedding party and somebody in the wedding party is murdered and we know somebody else in the wedding party did it, and we spend the whole book trying to figure out who. But it takes place on a rainy island in Ireland, and it's just the most fun. Like, you can probably bust this out in like 1 or 2 sittings because you'll be so, you know, captivated by this story and wanting to know who actually did it. And then I also have The Shadows by Alex North, just because of the woods vibes in this one. You know, any book where the majority of the story kind of takes place in the woods, I think is like the perfect book to read in the fall, because when I think of the fall, I think of the trees and the freaking woods and the freaking spookiness of the woods. And this book definitely has the spookiness in the woods kind of vibes. It definitely has those Slender Man vibes going, you know? It has that like lucid dreaming kind of thing happening in this book. It's just fantastic. And then I also have one of my all-time favorites, The Cabin at the End of the World, again because of the woods, you know? A lot of this book takes place at this isolated cabin that's in the middle of the woods, and we're following these two gay men and their adopted daughter when they're in their cabin, at their getaway cabin. And then these four people show up and it becomes this terrifying home invasion story, and these people want something from them that is just awful. It's just so terrifying to read this book. And then I also have Chasing the Boogeyman, even though I personally wasn't a huge fan of this book personally, but I feel like I have to mention it because everyone is really loving the hell out of this book right now. And this one is kind of like a true crime book that's written like a horror novel, because none of it is actually true. But this book is kind of confusing because the author himself is the protagonist in this story, and he's writing about his teenagehood where these four girls were murdered, but these murders never actually happened, but a lot of his childhood stories are true. It's very confusing, but it seems to be very well loved in the community, and I think if there's ever a perfect time of year to read something like this, it would definitely be in the fall, because this one definitely has the like spooky fall like woods vibes. It's like somebody's watching you maybe in the woods. Like, it's very creepy in that sense. Alright, and this next stack of books that I want to go through are all some horror books that I think would be perfect to read in the fall. I do have some Stephen King recommendations because I know a lot of people like to gravitate towards Stephen King in the fall, and I think if you're going to do that, my top recommendation would be Pet Sematary, mainly because this is my all-time favorite Stephen King book, and I think it's absolutely fantastic and terrifying in a different way than the rest of his books. You know, like this one is terrifying to me because it just feels so real, and that really scares me. And I personally read this book in October, and I just thought it was the perfect October read. I would also recommend The Shining and Salem's Lot, just because these ones are also just like, you know, classic spookiness. I also have a book that I think would be absolutely perfect to read on Halloween or as close to Halloween as possible, and that is Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. And the reason why I say that is because this book actually does take place on Halloween night, and we follow these four really famous, well-known horror authors as they're going to stay the night in America's most well-known haunted house called Kill Creek. And while they're staying there, it's going to be getting live streamed to the public. And this book is just the most fun. It's so much fun. Like, this premise is so cool. One of my favorite horror novels that I read this year that I think would be perfect to read in the fall is The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. This is another really great like haunted house kind of vibe. We're just following this family, you know, this couple, Nate and Maddie, and then their son. They're moving back into Nate's childhood home where his father used to abuse him, and so his father may or may not be still lingering around haunting this house or something. I also think if you are interested in checking out any like young adult horror or even like middle grade horror, then I do think The Taking of Jake Livingston and Hide and Seeker would be worth checking out, even though both of these books were just okay for me personally. Especially Hide and Seeker though, because this one I feel like if I was younger I probably would have enjoyed this a lot more. So if you do enjoy middle grade, I would definitely recommend checking this one out. It follows this group of kids and something seems to be wrong with this main character's best friend. It also has to do with the game hide and seek, and if you break the rules you summon the seeker. And then, you know, The Taking of Jake Livingston, this one involves ghosts, you know, it involves time travel, it involves just a whole bunch of spooky vibes for this time of year. This one also does have a lot of school moments, although I wouldn't classify this as like dark academia necessarily, but there's a lot of really creepy scenes that happen while he's at school. And then the last horror book that I have on this list is going to be Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. This book is massive. It's like over 700-ish pages, and I know it's super intimidating, but oh my god, this book is just, it's so good. I will say the last 200 pages of this book kind of suck, okay? The last bit of the book kind of does fall apart, but the first 500 pages of this book are so freaking good. And all you really know about this book going into it is that we're following this young boy named Christopher, and he goes missing in the woods for a couple of days, and when he returns, something about him is just off. You know, he is not the same kid that he was before. This book was just so much fun, and this book made me afraid of deer, which is a weird thing to say, but this one definitely has the ambiance of like the woods, you know, and like these kids, and it's very Stranger Things vibes in a way. And then this last stack of books that I have are all going to be books that kind of have a dark academia vibe to them, or at least they take place on a college campus, and I just think they'd be perfect to read in the fall, specifically because of that reason. Because I don't know about you, but I definitely crave academia books in the fall. Like, I don't know if it's because usually like you go back to school in the fall, so the fall always makes me feel nostalgic for like being in school. Don't know why that is, but the first book I would recommend is If We Were Villains. I think in general this is like the perfect book to read for fall, but especially because of the like dark school vibes, you know. This one definitely has those secret history vibes, you know, where we're following this group of pretentious college students and one of them get murdered, and it's just very intense, you know. And then I have The Maidens, which I know a lot of people are really not enjoying this book, but I would personally still recommend it. I thought this book was really great and really fun. This book is a thriller novel that takes place on a college campus, and we're following this professor who's getting accused of murdering one of his students. And it's just, you know, I think if you're going to read this book, fall would be the best time to do so, and I personally just had the best time reading this book. It seems to be getting a lot of hate right now in the book community, but I loved it so freaking much. And then I have Ace of Spades. This one is a young adult thriller novel that also takes place at this private academy school. We follow these two black students who go to this school, and I believe that they are the only black students at this school, but if not, they're one of the only black students at this school. And they both get selected to be a part of this like elite group that's like gonna be the students that are like the best in the school, or like running for valedictorian or something like that. And then they start getting these spooky anonymous messages from this person who calls themselves Aces, and this school just has a whole lot more going on. The school is just very spooky for them and just very not cool, and it's, you know, this book is a wild ride. I think it'd be perfect to read in the fall. And then we have For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. This is another one that takes place at a prestigious private school, and we follow this teacher named Teddy, who honestly reminds me so much of Joe Goldberg, and his like moral compass is just so skewed, and he's just such an interesting character to follow. And I think just because this book follows like on a campus, you know, for most of the book, it all takes place at a school, I think it's perfect to read during the fall time, okay? It just is. And then we have Bunny by Mona Awad. This one, it follows this girl named Samantha who is new on this college campus, and she joins this group of girls who all call each other Bunny, and they have something very strange going on. They're almost like a little cult or something. And this book is just wild. It's one of the most wild books that I've ever read. Wow, I have no words. I don't even know what to say about this one. It's just crazy, okay? This book is fucking crazy. And then the last one that I have to recommend is probably the one that I would recommend the most out of any book on this list. If you're gonna take any recommendation to read this fall from this entire list, then I hope that it's this one, because it's In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This book is like everything I've ever wanted in a book for the fall time. I'm so sad that I didn't read this book in the fall personally, but also I want to reread it again so badly that I might just pick it up again this fall, to be honest. And this book is the perfect, you know, like dark academia vibes, because we're following these 6 students who now they're 10 years out of college and they're going back to school for their 10-year reunion. But 10 years ago when they were in college, one of their friends was murdered and one of their friends was accused of doing it. It's been years since they've seen each other, since they've last spoken to each other. They're coming back to the school 10 years later to try to figure out what really happened that night. And this book is just so twisty, it's so crazy, it has such great plot twists, and it just has like the best like school dark academia vibes that you can imagine. It's everything. It's everything. I love this book so much. There was even a love triangle in this book that I genuinely cared about. Like, the romance in this book was actually really good for a thriller novel. I was so impressed. So yeah, this has it all. This is the perfect fall read. You're welcome. Alright, so those are all of the fall book recommendations that I have for you today. If you've read any of these books, then please let me know your thoughts. And also, if you have any books that you think would be perfect fall books to read, then please let me know, because I would absolutely love to know any of your fall book recommendations for me. I have, you know, a few books that I'm looking forward to reading this fall that I think will have great fall vibes, and that includes like The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. I also have White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. And back here I do have House of Leaves, which is one that I'm planning on getting to this fall. And of course, it would be super sick to get to And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie or The Haunting of Hill House, because those are two books that I've also had on my TBR for literally forever. Yeah, I have a massive TBR for the month of October, so I'm just so excited to get to everything. And yeah, thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!